What if the most important part of a building is not the steel, the glass, or even the blueprint, but the room where the idea gets tested, argued over, and rebuilt? Because behind many of the buildings we admire most, there is a place that does not look dramatic from the outside, the architecture design studio. And yet these studios can completely change how buildings are made. Today, I want to show you 5 fascinating angles on architecture design studios that explain why they matter, how they work, and why they can shape everything from a house to a skyscraper. First, an architecture studio is not just a workspace, it is a thinking machine. Unlike a typical office where people often move from task to task, studios are built for constant iteration. Sketches go on the wall, models sit on tables, digital renders, site maps, and material samples all exist side by side. That matters because architecture is not one single decision, it is thousands of connected ones. The mechanism here is simple. When ideas are visible, they become easier to compare, challenge, and improve. For example, a team might realize that moving one stairwell changes circulation, light, privacy, and construction cost all at once. In a studio setting, those trade-offs can be seen immediately instead of discovered too late on site. Second, studios use models to make ideas tangible. A model is useful because it shrinks a complex building into something you can physically inspect. And once a design becomes physical, flaws become obvious. Maybe the entrance feels too narrow. Maybe daylight hits the wrong side of the room. Maybe the roof form creates a drainage issue. This is powerful because humans are much better at spotting spatial problems than reading plans alone. A studio can test these issues early, long before expensive construction begins. A concrete example: if a school design looks great on paper but the hallways create bottlenecks between classes, a physical or digital model can reveal that flow problem instantly. Fixing it in the studio might save months of revisions later. Third, architecture studios force collaboration across disciplines. A building is never just an architecture project. It is structure, lighting, acoustics, climate, materials, budget, safety, and user experience all at once. Studios are where architects talk with engineers, planners, designers, and sometimes even clients or local communities. That matters because each expert catches different risks. For instance, an architect might prioritize openness, while an engineer knows that one column shift will make the structure far more efficient. In a good studio process, those conversations happen early, so the final building is not only beautiful but buildable, efficient, and safer. Fourth, the studio does not just shape a building, it shapes behavior. This is one of the most useful parts of architectural design, and it is easy to overlook. Small choices can influence how people move, gather, pause, or interact. A wide hallway can encourage social contact. A skylight can make a room feel calmer and more focused. A courtyard can create a sense of retreat in a dense city. The mechanism behind this is environmental psychology. People respond to light, scale, openness, enclosure, and pathways in predictable ways. So when a studio experiments with spatial layouts, it is not just about aesthetics. It is about designing the experience of being in the building. Fifth, the strongest architecture studios design for change. Buildings rarely stay exactly as they were first imagined. A home gets renovated, an office becomes a co-working space, a retail store becomes a clinic or studio. Good studios anticipate this by designing flexible spaces, modular systems, and adaptable structures. Why is that useful? Because flexibility reduces waste and extends the life of a building. Example: if a studio plans column spacing, service cores, and interior partitions carefully, a future owner can reconfigure the space without tearing everything apart. That is not just smart design. It is economic and environmental resilience. So when people think of architecture, they often picture the finished building. But a lot of the real magic happens earlier in the studio, where ideas are tested, simplified, challenged, and transformed. That is what makes architecture design studios so fascinating. They do not just draw buildings, they change how buildings are made. And once you notice that process, you start seeing every great building differently. 5 fascinating angles on architecture design studios that change how buildings are made is just one small part of Design Studio. If you are interested, our full free Design Studio course is linked in the description.